Greetings, brothers and sisters. So there is a monster colossal story here, and that is that either the Saudi Arabia is selling oil to the Chinese in the yuan, the currency of China, and not the US dollar, which means the end of the petrodollar, which I'll get into in a moment, or at least they're considering this, right? So there's various publications out here. Wall Street Journal, Saudi Arabia considers accepting yuan instead of dollars for Chinese oil sales. And Bloomberg, yuan jumps after report on Saudi's weighing its use in oil deals. And so this would be the end of the American dollar as we now know it, right? This is a monstrous story that is really hard to do justice to what it means. And you can see them saying here that the yuan's value has jumped. And so why is this important? Well, we went over and destroyed a whole country in Libya. I mean, the government and a leader, a quality leader for his people, because he was considering selling oil in a gold dinar and not the American dollar. And so the UN ordered, like America and France and other countries, NATO, to go in and destroy Gaddafi because he was doing that. He was no threat. He had given up his weapons of mass destruction. His people were happy. His country was thriving. He was, on the verge of achieving all 8 of the Millennium Development Goals. I think he was the only country in the world, any developing country in the world, that had achieved or was going to achieve the Millennium Development Goals from the UN, and yet they went in and took him out because he was going to sell, and this came out, the British government confirmed this, that he was going to sell oil for what is called the gold dinar instead of oil for dollars, right? Which would be the end of the petrodollar. And so what the petrodollar was, and I believe it's in the 1950s or 40s, there was a meeting among what is now considered like the G8, back when it was Europe and America. And it was decided that America would be the world reserve currency. And what that means is the American dollar is the standard around the world. All the value of all other currencies is pegged against the dollar. So when they say, all right, how much is the yuan worth? Well, how much is it in dollars? How much is the pound worth? How much is it in dollars? How much is the German mark worth or the Indian rupee worth? It's all compared to its value in dollars, right? And so that is a, powerful thing to have economically. And the reason the Europeans and these other countries wanted to do that is they saw that America was, number one, a melting pot, a much bigger country than all of Europe, and a melting pot of peoples from all around the world, poor peoples that would come and provide a labor force, and also would create a huge army that they could use to defend Europe. That's why the NATO agreement is so important, and why one of the reasons Trump was ousted, because he wanted to pull out of NATO, and America could supply the money and the military to defend Europe, right? And so it made sense to them to make America the world reserve currency. But then the Vietnam War happened, and America was just printing money because they no longer had to, peg it against gold or any other currency. And the French, who had gotten their butts kicked in Vietnam, didn't like it. I think the guy's name was Chirac, the leader, and he decided to pull all the gold out of New York banks. All the French gold and European gold was being stored in New York banks. A lot of it was being stored in New York banks because of America being the world reserve currency. And he saw that America could just print money. So he decided to pull all of his gold out, which created the possibility of a world economic collapse. And so this guy Kissinger, who was Nixon's Secretary of State, came up with what is considered a brilliant idea. And he went to the OPEC nations led by Saudi Arabia and said, look, you guys can sell oil for whatever you want. Just sell it in dollars. And that meant that people all over the world needed oil, and they'd have to convert their money into dollars to buy oil. And so that was, a way to create what's now called the petrodollar. And so that's what keeps the American economy on top, right? American economy in a position where it's still the world reserve currency. And so when Gaddafi decided to sell oil in the gold dinar, it was considered a way that the world economy could be taken down, and certainly America could be taken down. So they went and got rid of him, even though he had every right to do it, right? Because he had no love for America or the, European countries or whatever, these other powerful countries. And he wasn't doing anything to be a threat to them on a military level. But economically, well, that's something else. And so China is a much bigger country, and they purchase much more oil. And if Saudi Arabia, which has been a long-term American ally, decides to sell oil in the yuan, and then the yuan goes up, because the yuan is where, the yuan being kept at a low level is why America can buy Chinese products, right? Why all your stuff at Walmart's filled with Chinese products and other countries associated with China, right? Because they have very cheap labor, because their money is devalued, because what they have is people. They have like a slave population, right? A worker population that'll work for almost nothing. And so if the yuan goes up and the dollar goes down, which is happening, that's going to change the whole economic landscape, and it's going to be worse for everybody, right? Because the Chinese, their labor they won't be able to export things. You understand this, right? Their exports is what they do, manufacturing. But if they have to pay their workers more, or the value of their currency goes up, then that's a whole different ballgame there. And then, America that doesn't have the ability to export things, and people who are willing to do hard labor, and just all of it. Like, it means the end of the world economy as we now know it. Of course, they want to do a global reset, but America specifically is going to go down. Whatever happens to other countries, America's economy and lifestyle is going to change drastically as soon as Saudi Arabia makes that move, if they haven't already, because oftentimes they report these things after they've already happened. And so it might be a slightly delayed response, but you're going to see it. Everything's going to go up. Of course, gas prices are going to go up phenomenally for Americans. You could be paying $10, $20 a gallon for a gallon of gas. Who knows how high it'll go. The currency is going to be devalued. And then everything else will go up in terms of, not just in terms of inflation, but also in terms of, gas is basically the new version of gold, right? Where gas is the, what the currencies are pegged against, fuel and energy, and specifically gas. And so this could be like such a financial disaster we can't even contemplate it. We've seen these things before. If they're willing to go and conduct what was an illegal and immoral war in Libya over this, and that was on a much smaller scale, and Saudi Arabia has been America and Israel's longtime ally in the Middle East, right? And if they are, bailing on the dollar, that means that all these other countries will bail on the dollar, and they're favoring China. They're picking China now, the Chinese yuan over the American dollar, or at least, both of them. They're still going to sell oil in the dollar. But again, this is not good at all. I can't describe all the effects of this thing, but it's definitely, one of the biggest stories that isn't being talked about, because the effects of such a thing. The whole economy is predicated on the petrodollar, and that would be the end of the petrodollar. And who knows what their solution is, but their solution isn't going to be, oh, you guys are going to have a better deal, right? Like, you guys are going to have are going to be richer or whatever, whatever. You're going to have a better lifestyle. It means you're not, right? Of course, there's depopulation happening, and there's already World War III on the, is on the cusp of happening. A lot of desperate people out there, and things are getting reals, and and they're getting reals quickly. So let's go to another economic story before I get to the latest Kanye news and other little headlines to get to. Okay, so let's start here. There are varying reports of Voldemort Zelensky's net worth. The top search term revealed by Google says he's at $596 million total. He has got $11 million in income on a monthly basis, and his salary is $780,000. And so that's this website, and there's a lot of people saying he's worth $1.5 billion, right? Here, this is what they say on Yahoo News. And it says, as the war in Ukraine rages on, rumors about online regarding Zelensky's net worth, including assets such as homes and vehicles, estimates have ranged from 1.5 million to half a billion to 1.5 billion. Some news resources speculate that the tweets declaring the former comedian's net worth at 1.5 billion were efforts to undermine support for Zelensky and the Ukraine. So you don't know, like nobody knows how much this guy is worth. Like that's a speculative answer. It says here, some news sources speculate, right? They don't know. The news sources have no way of finding out. That's the same thing they said about Hunter Biden's laptop. They're speculating it might be from Russia. Well, that's a way of just lying by putting out some false information and, all of it, right? And I know he's worth more than 1.5 million. Like that would be ridiculous, right? And so, he's a player. And then there's this investment firm scoops up entire iconic Manhattan street for just $32 million. Historic Manhattan Street that boasts past occupants like Marlon Brando and E. Cummings and writer Theodore Drescher has been scooped up in its entirety by an investment firm for a modest $32 million deal. And there's a lot of this going on where people are now putting their assets into real estate, because Saudi Arabia is about to, dump the petrodollar. Still no post from Kanye. How Will Smith and Jada Smith figured out their open marriage. And I really don't want to read this thing, but, it was rumored for years, two rumors, that they had an open marriage. And the other rumor is that they were both bisexual and their daughter has come out as bisexual or multi, whatever it was, right? Where they have polyamorous. And so, at what point do they just tell the truth, right? Because they lied for years and pretend they had this perfect marriage. And, when you see them, like when Will Smith, if you go to his YouTube channel, I'm not recommending you do because his videos kind of suck, but they went on vacation with his family and she was like giving him the finger. And you've seen him like when her brother was giving him a back rub and he said, a man knows what a man needs, whatever it was, right? And she, the look of pain on her face, like she hates Will Smith.
Thoroughly probed, got in there and got to the real stuff. Alex probed me.
Sex, like once you've had sex, you walk different. It's in your back.
Only a man knows what a man needs. You ever made love to a man? No. You want to?
No, sir. Definitely don't look nerdy. You got some sexy vibes going. It's not nerdy.
And from that point, I never put profanity in my rap music.
Oh, what a lovely story. That is sweet.
And so, when are they just going to stop lying? Kim Kardashian silvers in silver bra top and leggings for Skim's pop-up party. And so whenever there's a controversy, she's sizzling right there. She's sizzling and has been airbrushed and has been, plastified. And whenever there's, something where they're selling and they have drama, is that the big one? And so, there it is. There's that. Julia Fox backtracks comments suggesting Kanye West is harmless. She dated this guy. She was in that movie Uncut Gems, which kind of sucks. Really, it was a weird movie. But anyways, they dated for a while. He never covered it, but she's sort of one of these Kardashian wannabes. And she said he was great and loved the relationship. But now she's bailing on Kanye because, it's the popular thing to do. Pete Davidson jokes about Wild Boys Night Out Wild Boys Night with Scott Disick. I guess he's a Kardashian of some sort. Trevor Noah, I said counsel Kanye, not cancel him. Aw. Did your crappy hit piece result in Kanye being canceled? That's a stunner. And now you're trying to walk away from it? Like, well, try being funny. Just like, or hire somebody who is. White House ignores its Hunter problem. Well, that's what they've done all along, right? There's other articles. There's a headline I saw that Hunter is the most protected person in America. That's coming from Fox News and the right wing. But, we know that Hunter Biden's laptop has been confirmed by the New York Times, which they could have confirmed it, back in the fall of 2020, right before the election. But they didn't. So that was a complete, whatever they want to say about the election. He's such a, he just looks like a stand-up guy. I mean, for a guy who's a millionaire and his dad was, he's a part of this elite crowd, he looks like, some sort of a meth dealer or something, right? Or, just everything bad. You could attribute his look to all the scummy kind of people in the world, scummy stereotypes. So this just keeps on going on and on. But Jojo Magoo says he's the smartest guy that he knows because, the guy can smoke crack and get millions of dollars from foreign companies. So he is pretty smart. Like, he's got things going on upstairs and they won't answer. And this is what Jen Psaki said about it. Psaki cut him off. The person said, my question about the conflict of interest when it comes to China is last year the First Son's attorney said that he had divested from a Chinese investment fund controlled by Chinese state-owned entities. Did he actually divest, and and Psaki cut him off. He's a private citizen. He doesn't work for the government. I point to you to his representation, she said curtly. I think we're done here, and she stormed off like Psaki do. So years ago, and for a number of years, my family, my first family in terms of my first marriage, was teetering on a brink, like, just walking the razor's edge. And there was one calamity, one possible, knockout blow type of, you can't get up, you can't recover from this type of situation, disastrous situations that were all around us, right? Just all these possible scenarios that were like, the end of the family. I mean, economically, socially, just all these, the interpersonal relationships, my, ex's health and mental health. Just all these things, right? And they were just piling up. And, just narrowly avoiding what could have been, just soul-crushing sort of disaster. And back then, right, I was deluding myself into believing that there was some way that we could triumph. Like things would turn, we'd finally get a break, right? The ball was always bouncing in the wrong direction, but not enough. Like, if it could have gone one way or the other, it always went the other. If the other meant the bad, then it went the other, right? But not bad enough to, put the nail in the coffin of our family and our marriage and things. But we were always just teetering on the brink, right? Of some, there's just things that can happen that you just don't recover from. And, we were, always just flirting with that type of a disaster. But I thought that there was a reason that we were going through this, and once we got through it, my ex would get better, or there'd just be some, a number of good things that would happen, and we would triumph, and the family would be, get along again like we used to when the kids were little. All these things. The farm would turn around, the homestead. And so I was just deluding myself because it was impossible. Eventually, it was going to fold. And it was, a merciful act when it finally did. And on a much larger scale, I always find humor in this. I've talked about this. I've worked in restaurants that were always on the verge of going under, or businesses or people, my friends who were, engaged in unhealthy practices, whatever it might be, drugs or gambling or, whatever it is, right? People have, alcoholic relatives, and there's either people or institutions or like, businesses or families that are in a sense doomed. And there's just something that I find funny in it. That's why, I call it the apocalaughs. I don't know why. you know, Even just thinking about it makes me get like, but when you have a situation where you have a whole economic global system, you can have individual collapse. You can have each person have, people have individual apocalypses, right? Somebody in the family dies of a car crash, or multiple members, or, somebody gets cancer. I mean, there could be any number of disasters that happen to people that just, they don't recover. You're going along smoothly, and then something really, horrific happens, and it's just almost like a knockout blow, and the person just doesn't have any fight in them to recover and reinvent themselves. And it took me a monumental effort to pull myself out of the post and pre-divorce, abyss, and then all the, slandering of my character and things that happened within the Heartfulness organization, and just all of it, and, end up having what is a much better existence now, spiritually and materially, than I had before. But it took a monumental effort at age, 51 or 52 to reinvent myself, and to some extent the family. And so, that was like a second chance. But there's times where, like, it's a business, or now we have a global economy, and certainly the U.S. economy and the U.S. way of life and the U.S. social system. I mean, it's U.S. morality, world morality, all these things. Culturally, socially, economically, physically, people collectively are on the verge of the death of something, right? Things die, things end, and oftentimes they don't end nicely. Sometimes they end in war and conflict, like divorces. When a marriage ends in a bad divorce, it's just a smaller version of a war, right? Like it's, similar to a war. Divorce is like going through a divorce is similar to like going through a war, because, it's more personal than a war. Of course, a war is more physically scary. But now we're on the brink of it, right? You can see it all around us. There's so many different ways. There's so many different knives pointing at our system and our country and us, maybe even individually. And it's about which one's going to, strike, right? And certainly the end of the petrodollar is something, the World War III is something, and then the push of the morality from the left, the Biden agenda, and just even, what Trump did, and then, of course, the stuff with COVID and all these things and all the stuff that went with it, we're just waiting to fall. Like, it's like we're in free fall, and we don't know it because we haven't hit anything yet, right? Like, we're already collapsed, but we don't know it because we're still, falling to the ground, and, we're waiting to hit the bottom. And one of the issues is that we've never been through this before, right? Like, we've never suffered a global economic meltdown. There's the Depression, but almost everybody who lived through the Depression is dead, and it's long been since forgotten. Other countries have had their economic collapses, and there's wars going on all around the world, but there's nothing like, what we're about to see. The things that are about to happen, there's no reference point in terms of the collective experience of human beings. The first time you get stung by a bee, or the first time something happens, like, you don't even know what it is, right? Like, it's, you're trying to figure out what, you might see you feel a sting or something. You're like, wow, what happened? And, you don't, it's like, wow, that really hurts, whatever it might be. Something, the first time somebody breaks your heart or whatever, like, you've never experienced it. That's why people go into love, their first relationships, innocent and open and trusting. And then they get stung by the, somebody, breaking their heart in some way. And that just changes everything. And then all of a sudden you're seeing the potential for someone breaking your heart, when the new person would never do that, right? Now you have all these trust issues. But the first experience, you go in and you don't, you can't even imagine it happening because you don't have any reference point for it, right? They used to say that, I don't know if this is true or not, but it was in some truther movie that came out that was kind of bogus. But anyways, there was this, story about Aboriginal people. Like, the medicine man could see the ships of the invading, European conquerors, but the normal natives couldn't because they didn't have a reference point for a big warship, right? And so, I believe that to be true. Like if you haven't experienced something, you don't really, you don't know what it's going to be, and we don't know how this is going to play out, right? Nobody does. The people controlling the system, I mean, there's all these choices that have to be made, and they're just the way that the dominoes are going to fall. And, I mean, they can go in any, conceivable direction, right? And, I cover this stuff all the time, and I've seen, certainly starting with the heartfulness teachings, the prophecies, the idea of a better world being born out of a better world based in spiritual principles. I mean, that's why I say only spirituality will save this world. And what that means is only if people connect to God internally and having a living interpersonal internal connection to God, right? Because when you have that, then you're going to have a conscience, and then you're going to have wisdom, and then you're going to have, all the things that, more natural existence. You're going to have compassion. You're going to have the ability to be moderate, right? To have a moderate lifestyle because, you're going to be filled with God's love, right? Everybody craves love, and materiality is just a perversion of that. Materialism is a perversion of God's love. And so when people are empty inside, they crave something. Like Madonna's saying in that old interview with Oprah that she just needed to be fed, right? She needed to receive when she was younger, like on a big scale, like with all the fans and all the, all the stuff that went with it, the fame and all those things, the money, the controversy, the attention. And there's people who need, when you don't have God's pure love, then you get it in lesser form, in a grosser form where there's less love, right? It's, nutritionally, in terms of pure love, God's love, and then, love from significant other and family members, and then, love from fans and artificial love from material possessions and things, where there's some love in it, but it's a very low nutritional value. So this idea of people having a deep interconnection with God and then not needing all the greedy aspects of their lives, not needing or wanting to be filled with all this, bad living, right? Filling the empty void with something that is destructive to yourself and everybody else. And so this idea that there's a solution and a better world in the making from the heartfulness system, but the demonic system has to collapse first. So that's the first thing, right? That's my jumping off point for this idea because I believe in the heartfulness system and its teachings. But then I look at the world every day. I've looked at the numbers economically. I look at the moral degradation. I look at the physical and mental degradation, how people are getting stupider and stupider, right? Dumber and dumber. It's like you go to Walmart, you look around, you're like, well, this is what the majority of people are like. Just seeing the way people treat each other on the internet, and then the celebrity culture and the politicians and the, just all of it, right? I see it on a daily basis. And there's like a million, different pitfalls. Like there's so many different ways our system is on the verge of collapsing and all these ways it can collapse. And even with that, even with all that overwhelming evidence, some part of me still is like, I don't believe it's going to happen, right? It's like this too big to fail. This attitude that humans have, all of us, that we're so dependent on the system that it can collapse, right? And it's never collapsed before, right? It's the law of inertia that, something that's been around forever isn't going to change, right? Like you just think, oh, the system is, it isn't collapsed yet, so why is it going to collapse ever, right? Like it just keeps on chugging along. Well, it might be indestructible. It would be here forever, but that's, of course, not true. But anyways, getting back to my point, it's, even hard for me to believe, right? Like, and I know it's going to happen. It's like I've lived through it before in some past existence or multiple past existences, right? The rise and fall of civilizations, and it happens. Empires collapse. We've seen it over and over again. But it's hard for us to conceive of because, and that's maybe the reason for all these apocalyptic and post-apocalyptic and pre-apocalyptic movies and TV shows, because like deep down, everybody's got to prepare for it. because some people, it'll just be too much for them. They just won't be able to handle the collapse of the system. Remember, how the Democrats were the night that Trump, not the pundits, Rachel Maddow and all these different people were, the night that Trump won the presidency. They were in this disbelief, like, some alternate reality. Rachel Maddow said, this is your reality now, right? They couldn't believe that there was a world or a possibility of a Trump presidency. And then they behaved in the most immoral and unethical ways for the next 4 years, tried to reverse this, this this abomination to them of a Trump presidency. They did everything possible to make sure he wouldn't win again because they couldn't handle it. And if something that small can make people glitch out and flip out and, dive to the low levels of their human character and behavior, then what do you think will happen when the whole system collapses, right? A lot of people just won't be able to conceive of living in a different way and changing and adapting and surviving and giving up their medication. Like how many people are on medication or self-medicating, what kind of addictions do they have, living without, lots of things, shopping, internet, electricity, whatever it might be, right? Running water, hot water, all these things that we've had our entire life. And how many people just can't handle, the majority of people not being able to handle that reality and just giving up and, whatever else might happen, depending on what it looks like. But the more we lose, the more, difficult it will be for people to adapt. Just glitching out and shutting down. And you see that happening even now, like a mass exodus of people who just won't be able to, deal with the new reality. So I was listening to, I was reading comments, I'm not listening, reading them just a moment ago. And this is like fresh off the presses. In my last video, hilarious Courtney Cox needs J-Lo glow. Kanye Grammy Band and Nancy reads a Bono poem. And this person, dang it, Paul, because I talk about truthers at the end of the video. Dang it, Paul, I know there's a bunch of dumb truthers out there, but you don't have to spend more time ripping truthers than ripping our true enemies. Well, I don't have enemies. I don't have enemies. Who's my enemies, right? Are they doing God's will by taking the system down? I don't know. I don't look at the world as I have enemies. Even people who I like, Mr. S or my ex, or if you've heard some of my other videos. But there was a great comment right after it saying, looking forward to Paul's quoting this comment with a couple emojis. And, this idea that somehow the truth community is separate from the beast in the system, right? And, this person, because it seems like they might watch more of my videos, the fundamental dishonesty that so many truthers have, the exaggeration, the inability to be a truthful person, an honest person, right? Because, how much time have I talked about the negativity of truthers? Maybe 20 videos. In some part of the video, the majority of that video, I was talking about Hollywood culture and whatever else, right? And then I get into the truther stuff. It's like a 40, 50-minute video for about 10, 15 minutes, right? So only a fourth of the time, or even less, I'm talking about truthers. And maybe, in terms of comment videos, most of those aren't specifically about the truth movement or the truth community. So let's say over, the last, 8 years or whatever, since I've been doing this full time, 50 videos or even 100 videos about the truth community. It's not that many, but let's just say it is. I've made between 4,000 and 5,000 videos total, right? So you kind of get a sense of, I'm not giving more time to ripping the truth community, right? It's just dishonest. You're fundamentally dishonest. You're not leaving a quality, well thought out comment. Aside from the very premise of the comment, because, we have truthers here and lots of them suck. And the truth movement is gone. It doesn't really even exist anymore. It's just a bunch of people who don't like each other, right? That everyone else doesn't like, collective. Right? it's a bunch of people that's been ostracized and demonized by everybody else, and they don't even get along with each other. So, I mean, it's like not even a community anymore, but, every once in a while I talk about it. And the majority times that I talk about it is they bring the suck to me. Like, I don't bring the suck. I don't bring the heat to them, right? I'm not like, I say things that provoke them that I'm not doing because of intentionally trying to provoke you. It's my M and F and channel, as I said before. Like, this is what I see and what I believe and what God shows me. And some of the things I'm not even really on board with myself, but I feel like, it's the truth and I say it, even though I don't necessarily agree with it. There's things that are truthful that I don't like. There's truth that I've had to deal with that I don't like, but you have to just accept it. Yeah, that's the truth. And sometimes, you can't even rise up to it and embrace it, but at least acknowledge that it's the truth. If you can't do it, sure. Like, it's like an addict who knows that they should quit using drugs but can't do it, right? And there's plenty of things I know I can do better, but I just, kind of lazy and, and so it's just like you have to admit it, right? At least admit, yeah, I should be doing better. Not in some self-flagellating way or whatever it is, right? But just admit, yeah, I could be doing better. And so many people in the truth community think they're perfect or think they've made it or something, whatever arrogance is there. Because, like I said, we were all one sheeple. Like, don't think like the sheeple are so far below you, because how many years ago were you a sheeple, right? Like, everybody's still a little bit of a sheeple. We're all going along with stuff that we know to be wrong. We're all using the economic system. We all delve into some sort of sheepledom or whatever, right? We all participate in the beastly system in one way or another. And so there's just a level of stupidity and arrogance that's developed in the so-called truth community. And they're the ones who bring it to my channel by, confronting me, trying to correct me like this, like bozo, right? I mean, it's just inappropriate. The comments are just remedial and bad. And I don't cover all of them. I only cover a fraction of them. And when I do, it's, in a humorous, light way. And so, I mean, but it's just another part of the truth, because even this idea about you having enemies, are the enemies people you actually met that actually did something to you personally? I mean, Joe Biden, how is he your enemy? Like, how is any of these people your enemy, right? Is Thanos also your enemy? I mean, they're just a part of a show that you don't even know, how real it is or not. I don't know how real it is or not. And so you're that upset about these fictional creatures, these puppets, these, they can't get through a press conference. How is he running the world? Like, how is he your enemy? Some senile old, lying shill of a puppet, right? See, it's a lack of faith in God, that this is covered under God's contingencies, that God will bring this back to, anything bad, anything that goes away from God eventually collapses, just like anything good collapses as well. That, we don't have to do anything. It'll work itself out. I mean, that's what people need to even think about in terms of your own lives. You have to do what you're ordered to do. You have to do the work that's in front of you. Everyone's got to figure out what that is, right? I mean, lots of videos I make are pointless. Like, what's the point? In terms of changing something. But again, I put some spiritual ideas about God being inside of us all, and, the possible glorious future of a world full of saints through, the heartfulness meditation vision of the possibility of everyone connecting to God internally, and, all these things. Yeah, those are all important ideas and whatever it might be. And, the jokes, jokes are, I guess they have a point, right? But this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And, my work outside, I'm going in and out. I got a project outside that I'm kind of excited about, doing these different springtime things and, interacting with nature and the animals and whatever it is. And so farm animals that we have, or even, the birds and the squirrels and the rabbits and things that are around us. And so, God has a plan. This is, this isn't some, they've cracked the code and they're going to usurp the divine system. They're not, right? The people who control the system, they're not that smart. They're not that powerful. And they don't have the ability to, take God's system and make it their own, right? They don't have the ability to usurp and take over the godly universe, right? The great usurpers from my book, The Choice. And so you can relax a little bit. I mean, you know more than you used to, but you still don't know enough, right? That's that's going to be, I got a notepad on my phone. I'm going to add that right now to it as a possibility for a t-shirt. You know more than you used to, but you still don't know enough. Only spirituality will save this world. It's Paul Romano, definitely pointing from the Apocalaughs and the Ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.